I passed my IELTS in one sitting and I maxed out. There is grading pattern, there is grading system, there is a way or structure they are expecting you to answer it. Now, in case you're watching and you're like, what should I study? What materials did you use? This is the juicy part. So like a hub for everything IELTS. They have different teachers that teach on the different sections. Hey guys, and welcome back to the channel. It's Chilo here once again, as always. And to be honest with you, this is one video that I did not see myself filming, but then just recently or so I started seeing a couple of you drop comments regarding or say something about how, you know, your IELTS, how you got it in one sitting, how you maxed out. Just say something. Honestly, I didn't know if this was something people wanted to see. But when I started seeing the comments, I'm like, you know what, I could share. I really hope this video helps someone. But just in case you're seeing me for the first time and you're wondering who is she and why is she talking about IELTS, my name is Chioma, aka Chilo. I'm a Nigerian who is a new permanent resident here in Canada. And one of the things, if you're conversant with the Canadian PR route, is that you have to write an English proficiency exam, which in this case is IELTS. So I wrote IELTS and I did a video on IELTS that said my IELTS was withheld, but I passed my IELTS in one sitting and I maxed out. Now I want to correct this whole maxed out comment or statement, because I saw a very funny comment, and even though I ignored it, but I want to just comment on it. Now, my cumulative score was 8.5. If you're familiar with the IELTS scoring or marking, you know that 9 is the total, but 8.5 cumulative also means that you got 9 in several ones. But it's not even that. If you're also very familiar with IELTS, maybe you're in the pool or you've calculated your CRS score before, you know that when it comes to the points you get from English proficiency, right, they don't just ask you for your max, like your overall cumulative. What they ask you for in the CRS calculator most times is the score, the particular score for each category. So let me break it down more. This means that IELTS have English, speaking, writing, reading, listening. Now, those 4 areas in the IRCC website have their maximum scores. For example, listening might be maybe speaking, or listening might be, or reading might be 7 to 9, meaning whether you got 9 in that area and someone that got 8 in that area, both of you got the maximum points from reading. Speaking might be 8 to 9, so someone that had 7 will not get the max. So when I say I maxed out, means for all the areas, speaking, reading, writing, listening, I got the maximum points from all those areas for the CRS score calculator. So there's nothing I could do to get any more points from my English proficiency part. So that's what I mean by I maxed out. And let me be honest with you, and that's why in that video I told you guys, aim to max out all the areas and not just to max out, because there can even be people who will get another type of 8.5 permutation or variation, and that person might not max out all the areas. Maybe you just had a good strong score for 2 areas and then you had a low score. So basically that's what max out is. Without further talk, let's just get right into this video. I broke this into 6 points, into 6 major points or things that I feel like would help. Guys, this is not an almighty formula. I don't know it all. I'm not an expert. I've never taught IELTS before. I'm not an IRCC official, nothing. I'm just sharing from my little corner, my little experience, my small experience, but I hope it helps someone out there. So my very first point is definitely, I will advise you, understand the structure of the exam, understand it's an exam, target a score. So I'll just call this understand the exam. Now what I mean by this is understand the structure. I remember when I first made up my mind that I was going to write IELTS, or we made up our mind I was going to write IELTS. Prior to this time or that time, I had actually written TOEFL before. So now a lot of times people just go with the notion, especially if you're someone who has written TOEFL exam before, you just feel like, oh, another English exam, isn't not all of them are the same? No, don't go in with that mindset. Understand the structure. Have questions at the back of your mind, like what does the IELTS entails? If you need to do a quick scheme on the Google to know IELTS, just understand the structure of how the exam plays out. Are you doing the reading in one day? Are you doing the speaking on different days? As little as those information is, it adds up to making you more prepared and to know how to best tackle and prepare for the exam. So you want to know, is it CBT? Is it computer based? Is it written? Is the oral the same day? Is the oral different day? Are you speaking to the computer for the speaking? Are you speaking to a human being? Are you talking with your colleagues? Are you booking for understand the structure of the exam? For example, the major difference I noticed between TOEFL and IELTS for me was that the speaking, unlike for TOEFL, you have to speak to the computer. They give you a prompt and then you speak into the system. For IELTS, on the other hand, you have to speak to an official and that person does the grading. So something as little as that, to you it might feel like it's not that deep, but it's deep because now when you're speaking to someone else, you have to take into consideration, if you're someone that has stage fright, you have to really practice for it. Your body mannerisms, your confidence, even if you have stage fright, how are you able to manage your voice in a way that it doesn't give off that you're shy? So little details like this adds up to helping you be more prepared. So understand the structure. And the second part of this first point, like I said, is understand that it's an exam. And this is actually funny that we have to say this, because I've watched a couple of YouTube videos here on YouTube, or videos here on YouTube, where people said, oh, they just felt like, it's just English. I almost fell into that trap. But I'm grateful that I'm someone who watches a lot of videos before I venture into things. Don't fall into the trap of feeling like, is it not just English that we're speaking every day? Now let me give you a very funny example of how this thing plays out. When I was in Japan, one of the manuscripts I wrote for publication, in case you don't know, I used to live and study in Japan. I did my PhD in Japan. So one of the manuscripts I wrote, and I gave it to my assistant professor, I think first, to go through it before my professor. I've forgotten how that thing happened. And when he came back to me, guys, the number of red marks, the number of red corrections, I started feeling like, now if you're familiar with Japan, you know that the Japanese people are not English speakers. So in my head, I'm like, I'm the one that used to be in this lab feeling like an English speaker. How come I have all these red marks from my Japanese assistant professor? Of course, he's very exposed. He's lived in the US and all that. But then he made a statement to me, and that statement has stuck in my head. He said, from his experience, from over the years that he's been doing this professorship job, he noticed that there are usually more corrections from English speakers than from non-English speakers. And I'm like, hold up, how? And it boils down to overconfidence. And sometimes he said that we write as if we are talking. So there is spoken English, there is written English. So that statement, as funny as that scenario is, it's stuck in my head. Remember, it's an exam. And when once something is an exam, it means that there is grading pattern, there is grading system, there is a way or structure. They are expecting you to answer it. There is something they are looking out for. There is a pattern. There is an appealing way. For example, in the written part, they might want 3 paragraphs, 4 paragraphs. So don't just go into the exam mood feeling like, is it not just English I've been speaking every day? No, my dear, the one you're speaking is normal English. The one you want to go and write is exam English. So just keep it at the back of your mind that this is an exam. Understand it's an exam and approach it as such. Don't just approach it as you register for it today, you want to write it tomorrow because is it not just English? I'm not saying there are people who have not done this and excelled very well, but I'm just saying that understand it's an exam. The next part of this is still number 1, understanding the exam, is targeting a score you want. First thing I did, like I said, is still part of understanding the exam and everything, was Also, if I know some people are looking to write the IELTS either for academic purposes, maybe to study abroad. Some other people is for the IRCC or permanent residency stuff. Now, if you're looking for IRCC or permanent residency, one of the first things you want to do is go onto IRCC website and check the CRS calculator. Now, when you go to CRS calculator, it will give you an idea for this thing I just said in the beginning of the video of the score you are like that you should target for each area. I've heard people made a mistake of saying things like, I'm just targeting 7 over cumulative of 7.5 and I'm good. And I'm like, no, your target is not just for the cumulative. Your target should be for each area, because your score is coming from maxing each area, not just from the cumulative. So I remember my target then was 888. Was it 888 or I think it was 888 on a minimum and some 9s. So like I was targeting 8.59 max. Like that was my target for all the areas, because I really wanted to max out, to have a target, understand the exam, understand the structure, understand what you're using it for, and have a target score. My second point is definitely start on time, guys. Honestly, like when I see people or when I hear people say things like, oh, I want to write the IELTS next week, I paid this week, and I'm just like, okay. Now, I'm not one to use my experience to judge everybody. I've seen people who do that and they do excellently well, but I'm just someone who feels like I have a mantra that I go through life with, which is that anything worth doing is worth doing well. So even if it's common English, I want to give it time. So I always tell people, give it time, start on time. For example, we made up our mind that we were going to be in the pool around February of 2023, and so we paid for, I remember we paid for our IELTS in November, and our exam was January 4th or January 7th. So if you calculate it, I remember it was November ending. That means we had, or no, not November ending, I can't remember, but that means we had a part of November, the whole of December, and first week of January to prepare for the IELTS. Now, what this does to you is that you're able to better plan your studying, you're able to better strategize your studying, you're able to break it down, you're able to practice, you're able to search out materials, you're not rushing. I feel like most things that are rushed are not done well. Now, I'm not saying there are not people who are outliers who wrote the exams in 1 week and got it, but I'm just saying, if anybody who is watching me who have known me from any school, if you studied with me, whether it's high school, secondary school, hard day school, university, you know this part of Chioma. I always like to start on time. Semester will be starting today. From next week, Chioma, Chilo, whatever I was called Chilo here in uni. I start studying 1 week, I remember, immediately after the semester resumes, because I don't want to be caught. I'm not among those students that like to test my patience or test God, like, and maybe a week to exam and now do night crash, like crash course, crash jacking. No, I like to start on time. So it's my advice, so I'll say start on time. Now let's get into the tougher things. Number 3 is study hard. Now this actually tallies with the first point of understanding it's an exam and treating it as such, because a lot of times if you do not take it like an exam, you will just feel like, is it not just English? I'll write it. Now in case you're watching and you're like, what should I study? What materials did you use? This is the juicy part. So now IELTS have a textbook, like their official textbook. It comes with a CD. I remember I had to go to the library back then in Japan. I had my student ID card, so it was accessible to students. I went to the library and I borrowed that textbook. It came with the CD. And there's this other mantra I live by, which is that any course, this is me in uni days. So I remember I always say things like, any course that has a textbook, that's the gold mine you need for the exam. Because I don't believe that the institution responsible for that course will come together and write a textbook and not use the textbook to set the exam. I believe so strongly in this that textbook is never a waste. I remember there was this course that had a big textbook, like big as in CEDR, entrepreneurship development. What's the full meaning of that course? People were always complaining of that course. Oh, CDR textbook is big. See, that was in my year 3. CDR textbook is big. Men and brethren, Chilo finished the textbook, and that's a good thing with starting on time. You'll be able to pace yourself well. Trust me, it was a subjective question, and I really I enjoyed that exam, because like I said, the textbook is the gold mine for most exams, that for most courses that have a textbook. I'm bringing this back to IELTS. Now, I borrowed that textbook. I can't remember the exact number, but it was a big textbook, how I usually break down big textbooks to read. In case you're watching and you're like, okay, how did you study a big textbook? So I remember, let's give a random figure. Let's say the pages of the textbook is 260 pages. What I would usually do is, when I get a textbook that is big, and because it can be very overwhelming, right? I'll check the number of the pages. I'll say, okay, 260. And I would ask myself, how many days do I have to read? So like I told you, I started in November. Exam was January 4th, and then I like to give myself a week to revise. So I gave myself, okay, let's say I have 30 days to revise. And this is also because I don't like to overwhelm myself, so I gave myself weekends to rest. So I didn't read on any weekends. What I was doing then was 2 hours every day after lab. So I'll come home from lab, then sit on our reading table and then read for 2 hours. Immediately 2 hours elapsed, I go about my life. So imagine investing 2 hours for 5 days a week. That's 10 hours a week, because I removed the weekends. I wanted to just lounge and have fun with my husband, go out and all that. So let's say I had 30 days to read, and now this book has 260 pages. What I usually do is 260 divided by 30 is like 8.66 thereabouts. So let's say 9 pages. So that means for every day I read, for every 2 hours I spent reading, I should at least read 9 pages. So by the time you see it as just 9 pages a day, so don't get overwhelmed by the 260 pages. Don't get overwhelmed by the entire staircase. Take it one step at a time, and one step at a time is 9 pages a day. Now trust me, there are some days you will go beyond 9, because 9 pages might be story, and you still have maybe an hour to go, because like I said, I read 2 hours every day, for the 5 days a week, every weekday. I read 2 hours every weekday. So by the time your target is like 9, the target is like 9 pages. Some days you might even go to 10, some days you can even go to 14 pages, but the days where you stop at 9, you don't feel like you did not achieve a lot, because your target is 9. Now, if you cannot get the textbook, I also know some people have the PDF version. Now, I'm not the best with anything CBT. Like, I don't know, I just feel like it's not my strength, because I have blue light ray, like it just overwhelms me at a point, and that was my issue with GRE, I remember. So that's why I preferred getting the official textbook from the library. So I think some people actually do have the PDF. You can ask them for who has the PDF, ask around, get the PDF. It's still the same number of pages, you still get the audio clips and everything. Pace yourself and study the materials. Now, I'm not just only saying study, like have a jot. I remember when I was trying to pack up to come to Canada or leave Japan, I remember seeing that exercise book. I dedicated it to IELTS. I would jot my thoughts. I would jot out of, you see that 9 pages, I will marinate it, write it down. Now, there were some pages that might have mini questions. I remember, is it at the end of the textbook, there are questions there, but you have questions. Don't skip the questions. The questions are also very helpful. Pace yourself so that you don't get overwhelmed by it. If you need to do 1 hour every day, target it. If you need to do 2 hours every day, target it, but give it time. Personally, for me, I prefer to be over prepared for an exam than to be under prepared for an exam. So that is that for the third point. And the fourth point that I'll be talking about is use other materials too. Don't just use the official materials. And that's because sometimes the official materials, you know how official course course outlines can be. Now sometimes the official materials can be a bit, maybe you might find it not really explanatory, like what do you really want in the writing section. I used aside the official materials, I used YouTube videos. So if you watched my other video, you know that I recommended IELTS E2 Learning. I used E2 Learning YouTube channel. Now E2 Learning is like a hub for everything IELTS. They have different teachers that teach on the different sections, formulas, structures. Some of them are past in IELTS, markers and all that. But I just found that I liked Jay's teaching more, and I think it's not only because when I got to know about E2 Learning too from Tolulope Solutions, and she too said she liked Jay's teaching. So I'm not going to only tell you to look out for Jay, but if peradventure you start and you didn't find some interesting, I'll just say go to Jay's playlist. Like, they have a playlist. Jay has a way with explaining all the sections, how to approach writing prompts, how to look out for in writing prompts, what to address, the kind of clauses that will get you good scores, simple sentences, complex sentences, average sentences. Like, they will break it down. So what I usually do then is let's say the 9 pages I'm reading for that day is targeting, let's say, listening. I've marinated the 9 pages, maybe even exceeded the 9 pages. I will now open YouTube, watch YouTube videos, let it sink in some more, so that I know that, okay, I'm having this section on lock. You do this in such a way that when you're done with a section, I know that the IELTS is divided into 4 in their textbook, reading, listening, speaking, whatever, so that when you're done with one section, you can hit your chest and say, I am done with this section, because you marinated the textbook and you also used other materials. So I hope that makes sense. Now the 5th point I'll be saying is time yourself. When you now get to, I think there's a section that is only for questions. For example, it has 5 test papers: test 1, test 2, test 3, test 4. In each test paper you have all the 4 sections. You can do test 1 just without timing, test 2, test 3, or depending on how well you think you're grounded. But after a little while, please start to time yourself, because I think that's another major mistake people make. People go into the exam, they are very, very prepared. You read the entire textbook, you studied YouTube videos, you studied materials, you have a jotter, like your head is blowing IELTS, your English is blowing IELTS English, but then you did not time yourself, and then it affects you. This affected me in GRE. Time yourself. So if you started without timing, after a while, know when to start timing yourself, especially when your exam is approaching. I remember the exam was January 4th. We started to time ourselves from mid-December thereabout. So if a section says 60 minutes, we'll put a timer. I'm not joking, me and my husband, we'll put a timer, and once the timer blows, I get his script, he gets my script, and we mark, because they have the answers behind. And when you're marking, be discussing it either with someone or with yourself, like, oh, okay, this is why I failed this section. Time yourself, so that it's not a case of you're over prepared, but then you're timing. Because that's why I said understand is an exam. One of the things lecturers will always tell you, an exam is an exam too, because there is a time interval. It is no longer an exam if there is no interval. There's no time interval. So time yourself, so that whatever time comes to the exam hall, you're not shocked. Know what IELTS give for speaking, how many minutes, know what they give. Do you have 1 minute to think about your point before you speak? Do you have how many seconds before the next exam? Understand this. Time yourself, use a timer, and respect the timer. For some people, because they are doing it on their own, when the timer goes on, you're like, let me just do this last one. No, because there's nobody there, which does not mean you should lie to yourself. Use a timer, time yourself, so that you start working on your speed, so that your speed and accuracy can go hand in hand, because that's part of what is being tested in the exam hall. Now the last, which is my 6th point, is your mindset. So I think this is very important because I've seen so many people sell the notion that it is impossible to write it once and max it. It's more like, oh, just test the water with one, and then the second one is the it. Have a mindset and a conviction of, I'm going to write this exam once and for all. So, and when it's not just to be saying this thing, when you're saying it, act it out. You know, when a wounded lion is trying to get the last meal before it dies, act it that way. Act like someone who is like, I'm not. I remember one of my strong motivation was, I don't even have the time. I was almost entering my final semester. I had trips lined up to make, and aside having trips lined up to make, the expenses, we had to travel to Tokyo, book a hotel, pay for the IELTS, pay for feeding, pay for transportation. So in my head, I was telling my husband, babe, we are not going to write this exam twice. We'll write it once, and so we'll give it our best. So have a mindset shift of, I'm going to write it once, and I'm going to write it once and for all. Now something just came to my mind, so I'll put it as a bonus point. What I'm also going to advise is, identify your strengths and your weakness. It doesn't make you a dummy or a dullard, but when you're to be forewarned is to be forearmed. When you know about something, you can arm yourself and better prepare. Now this cuts across so many areas when I say identify your strengths and weakness. For example, I've said it a couple of times here that I don't do well with CBT exam. Not like I will do so bad, but I think I do better with paper-based exam. So what we did was, immediately we wanted to book the exam, we first identified, for me and my husband, I remember we had the conversation that evening that, babe, I don't do well with CBT exams. My husband said the same thing. Me too. So I remember we were seeing some closer centers, some closer dates and closer centers to our city that was for CBT. But both of us were like, no, we don't want CBT. So the one we saw for paper-based was that January 4th. So because we identified that our strength or our weakness is CBT, we now tilted more towards paper-based exams, so that at least I can flip back and forth of the paper. But what happens with me is, with CBT exam, by the time I'm scrolling up and down with mouse, the tweaking from the system starts to get to me. But with paper-based, I can turn back, use pencil, scribble. I just find it much better with paper-based exams. So know your strength. Are you also someone who doesn't do well with CBT exams over time? Please do paper-based. Are you someone who doesn't do well with paper-based exam? Maybe it slows you down, paper slows you down. Please do CBT. Identify your strength. Another area that this strength and weakness plays out in is in the areas, for example, reading, speaking, writing, and listening. What areas do you think is your weakness? For me, I thought, or I identified that I don't do so well with writing. I don't know whether it's that I identified, or maybe that statement my assistant professor made stuck in my head. So I put in so much energy, so much vigor. Like when it got to the writing section, I was so attentive. I remember E2J YouTube channel, as in E2 IELTS, Jay's teaching, when he's explaining how to structure the writing, how to approach the prompt. I'm like, okay, if I remember, I had a formula book where I wrote down I really tackled it like it was a weakness. And trust me, guys, I think I even did better in my writing than in one other area that I felt I got it covered. So like, really approach your weaknesses like it's a weakness. And then doesn't mean you should look over your strength though. Like I said, now the luck is that I read everything, so I maxed everything, but at the same time, just remember what your weakness and your strength is. And then when it comes to mindset thing, again, guys, pray. I will not end my video without saying that I held God by the hem of his garment. Guys, I kept telling God, I don't want to write this exam twice. I don't want to write it twice. So like, There's this thing that I don't know if it's a Nigerian adage or it's a popular adage, but this thing that they used to say, pray as if it only depends on praying and study as if it only depends on studying. That had been my mantra. That kind of mantra carried me all through my uni days. I will read, people will be like Chilo, and then I will pray. So I will pray. I'll be like, God, people might see it as, it's not just English exam, it's not that deep. To me, as long as you have called it exam and I paid a good amount of money for that thing, that money can always, it is deep enough. And let's be honest, God actually cares about the so-called little things and the so-called big things in our lives. So yeah, mindset also is telling yourself that you write this thing once and for all and praying about it, because it's worth it. It's actually a prayer point. So yeah guys, I think this is all the points that I have so far. Thank you so much for this video. I hope you found it helpful. I hope you enjoyed this video. See you next time on Chilotalks. Bye for now guys.